In this video, we're going to answer the question, can you qualify to file as exempt on IRS Form W4? So what this means is, can you not pay any federal withholdings throughout the course of the year? And if you have a tax liability, can you just pay it at the end of the year? Now, I'm making this video in response to a comment that I got on a previous video that I talk about how to file exempt on the IRS Form W4. This video is for the qualifications. So this question comes from Bully McGuire, and he said, I like exempt because I get extra buying power and can make more money in my investments if I put off paying taxes until when taxes are due. No penalties as long as you file on time. The first thing I want to point out is I do a lot of IRS Form W4 videos on this channel, and the whole intent of them is so you can pay the correct amount of federal withholdings, so you don't get a big refund at the end of the year because that's like a government free loan. You want to pay the correct amount. The second thing I want to point out is you should never leverage money that you have to pay out, in this instance, in taxes, and then leverage it to go out and invest. That's a terrible idea, because if the stock market goes down, all of a sudden that tax bill comes due and then you don't have the money. That's very, very dangerous. And the last thing I want to point out is you can't just willy-nilly file as exempt unless you meet the qualifications. But let's just go ahead and back up for a second and let me explain why. So let's go ahead and flip over to the IRS Form W4, and I can show you exactly where you should be looking. Now, if you look at the IRS Form W4 and we scroll down, you're going to see the definition for the qualifications in order to file exempt. And I'll explain why this is so important to understand it, because exempt from withholdings, according to the directions or the instructions, you may claim exemption from withholdings for 2022 if you meet both of the following conditions. You had no federal income tax liability for 2021, and you expect to have no federal income tax liability in 2022. If you meet those qualifications, you can file as exempt, and the way to do it is to claim exempt from withholdings, certify that you meet both of the conditions above by writing exempt on Form W4 in the space below step 4C. And that's exactly what I talk about. But that sentence is really, really important because you are certifying that you meet both of these qualifications. So if you don't meet both of these qualifications, in essence, you're lying, and that is a problem. So here are the consequences that you could face if you file as exempt but don't actually meet the qualifications, because basically it's dishonest, and you could find yourself in some hot water and maybe even some embarrassment with your employer, because what is your employer going to get in the mail? They are likely to get what's called a lock-in letter. Now, if you're not familiar with a lock-in letter, I was not familiar with a lock-in letter because I've never seen anybody get a lock-in letter, because I don't tell people to file exempt unless you meet those qualifications. But if you want to know what the lock-in letter is, the IRS actually has a whole video on what the lockout letter is that you can watch, and they'll explain it. But in a nutshell, it is a letter that the IRS will send to your employer telling them that you can no longer submit your IRS Form W4, and they are going to tell the employer how much federal income tax to withhold for your paycheck. Now, that might not be favorable, especially if you need to make some adjustments throughout the course of the year. You're going to find yourself in some hot water with this, basically a mandate in order to withhold the correct amount in taxes. But it's not just that. If we actually look at the law, right here, it says false information with respect to withholding, and there is a possible civil penalty. And the law says if any individual makes a statement under Section 3402, which results in a lesser amount of income tax actually deducted and withheld than is properly allowable under Section 3402, and at the time of the statement was made, there was no reasonable basis for the statement, the individual shall pay a penalty of $500 for this statement. So you could possibly have a $500 penalty and mandatory withholdings that the IRS sends to your employer, and now the employer knows that you were playing games. And if you're not honest with the IRS and your employer realizes it, they might be wondering, well, if you weren't honest here, or are you going to be honest with us? Just saying. So if you do qualify to fill out the IRS Form W4 as exempt, go ahead and watch my other video, how to file exempt on your IRS Form W4. Again, link in the description at the bottom. And if you don't, move on. You don't want the lock-in letter and you don't want a $500 penalty. If you have questions, let me know in the comments down below. Of course, if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and leave your comments down at the bottom.